Initiation by Robert Hugh Benson, Section 13, Chapter 7, Subsection 1. It had been an extraordinarily happy week for Neville, though broken abruptly by the girl's death, and when the Thursday dawned that was to take the Bessingtons back to town, he awoke in the mood in which a schoolboy wakes on the last day of the holidays. Yet it was to be a very short term. In a fortnight he was to go up to town and stay there at least 3 weeks. Without Aunt Anna, indeed, who had been very resolute about remaining in the country, but with the Bessingtons' flat not further than a couple of streets away. There they would all three spend 3 weeks at least. There were mysterious legal arrangements to make and a large number of amusements to be visited. Until the lawyers had been consulted, the date of the wedding could not be fixed. October was the month provisionally decided upon. Immediately after breakfast again, with the schoolboy's determination to make the most of the time, Neville had unashamedly made his demand, as he followed the 3 ladies into the hall. "Enid," he said, "I am going to be quite plain with you. You will kindly go upstairs immediately and make every arrangement that you will have to make before you go. You will be down here again in half an hour's time, and I shall then conduct you to the woods. We shall remain there till it is necessary to return for lunch, and at 2:05 the motor will be at the door to take you to the station." "Cousin Neville," said a small voice, "don't bother me, my dear. I'm talking." "Well?" Enid bowed. "It shall be done," she said. Aunt Anna saw them go. She was in the housekeeper's room as they crossed the garden. They disappeared. Then she heard the distant clash of the gate. "I beg your pardon," she said. "I wasn't attending." "Yes, the mayonnaise will do excellently. Mrs. Templemore." Start of subsection 2. The June weather was justifying its name to the full as the two, 10 minutes later, reached the place on which Neville's imagination had fastened and sat down. The sky really flamed with blue. There was no other word, so far as they could see anything of it between the high trees here that very nearly met overhead. They sat on a bench above the ride that curved round here over the crest of the hill that hung over the lower slopes of the park, with their backs against a small marble monument resembling a flat urn erected in the glorious Georgian days by Neville's grandfather to the memory of a favorite horse whose bones lay beneath it. Beneath them, the ground behind the ride fell steeply down to the flats, clothed in bracken and protected by giant beeches. So far as they could see on either side, as well as behind, if they had chosen to turn around, stretched the green, scented gloom of the woods. The air was alive with the hum of 10 million invisible flies. Between the trees in front, far across the tops of the pines that skirted the edge of the open park, the melting blue line of the downs faded, like soft penciling, into the steady blue of the sky, and one V-shaped gap showed a patch of indigo sea. After a minute or two, Neville got off the bench and sat down on the ground and leaned his head against Enid's knee. It was exceedingly unlikely that anyone would come this way. Then he felt, as he had hoped to feel, a hand slip behind his curly hair. The hand began, very gently, to finger the lobe of his right ear. "Now," said Enid, "we'll begin. I've got a lot to say, too, you know." "You first, then," said Neville. "My word, this might very nearly be Frascati again. What a day." "Which?" "Both." From the farm far across the park beneath them came the shrill crow of a cock. "I told you so," said Neville. "There's the cock, too. Now he's pecking his hens, I expect. Remember?" Start of subsection 3. Half an hour later, they were approaching the point. "I think that's really nice of you," said Neville. "I love to be told my faults. Let's see. I was a little abrupt with Jim this morning, and I really ought to be able to get up when I mean to. You're perfectly right. I'll go to Mass tomorrow for penance, and I'll swear to teach Jim tennis this afternoon as restitution. Will that do?" The fingers delicately pinched his ear again. "You don't mind my telling you," said Enid softly. "I never meant to, you know, when I began." "Mind it? Go on, tell me some more. I've got lots of faults." "I know that. I say, look here." There was a pause. "Shall we have a compact?" said Neville. "You know you've got some faults, too." "Oh, yes. I can be quite brutal, too, if it comes to that." The finger relinquished his ear for a moment. "You don't mind my saying that?" said Neville, a little anxiously. The fingers again reassured him. "Tell me them this instant," said Enid. "I won't till you make the compact." "Look here, my darling, we're both extraordinarily sensible people, aren't we? Thoroughly wholesome-minded and honest and all the rest. Let's make the compact to be quite plain with one another, but never when either of us is in the least annoyed or upset. We must count to 10, so to say, always before speaking. Do you agree?" "Yes, I think so," said Enid deliberately. "I think that's rather a brilliant idea. You begin." "Sure. Quite sure. Go on, please." Wait, have you got any more of mine up your sleeve? 2, said the girl after a moment's reflection. No, that's all right then, because I've only got 1 against you. This instant, please. Well, it's about Father Richardson. No, it's not the least what you think. Softhand was pulling gently at the short curls now on the back of his neck. It ceased for a moment, then it went on again. Well, I'm waiting. I think you were rather hard on him yesterday. Why? I thought, yes, I know. However, I accepted that. I knew it wouldn't work, but I gave in. Then he came to dine on Monday, didn't he? And you were simply delightful to him, all about Rome and so on. He loved it. He was quite eloquent about it, next day. He congratulated me, really and sincerely, for the first time. Then, if you remember, we met him in the garden on the Tuesday, and you insisted on him coming with us. I'm sure he never meant to. Then, yesterday, you suddenly turned round on him. What did I do? My dear, you withered him. And he really wasn't doing any harm. He really thought it his duty to come up and say goodbye on your last evening. He said so to me afterwards, and you simply turned your back on him. The hand was resting motionless now on his collar. Well, said Enid, I really meant to be rather disagreeable. It was a little too much, our last evening. I thought he knew better than that, and he stayed an hour. Entirely your own fault, my dear. He simply can't get away when he once comes. I could have told you that. In fact, I think I did. Now I'm not in the least objecting, just at present, to your being nice to him, nor to your being nasty to him. But I do think you oughtn't to be first very nice, and then suddenly very nasty. It's not playing the game. There was silence. I say, you don't mind? My dear boy, I'm very glad you told me. I was only counting 10. I'll remember. I think you're perfectly right. I'll be more careful. But you know, yes, I don't think I like Father Richardson much. Neville gave a little gurgle of laughter. What did I tell you? Yes, I know. You needn't triumph any more. I give in. I'm afraid he's not quite a gentleman. Neville was glowing with delight. He had been a little nervous about halfway through his criticisms, about how perfectly she had received them. But just a flicker of discomfort came to him at her last words, but he dismissed it. And now, for mine, he said. There are 2, you said. Give us the worst first. The hand began on his hair again. You're sure you won't mind either? I shall positively kiss the rod. He twisted his head suddenly, sideways, and managed just to touch the slender fingers with his lips. There, he said. Now go on. Well, they're neither at all big. The first is about the servants. Well, Masterson. But he's perfectly splendid. Wait, you haven't heard. Neville, my dear, he isn't respectful enough. He really isn't. He's familiar. Do you remember that? That time when he came to tell us about the accident? Her voice trembled a little. Well, I know he was excited then, but that wasn't the only time. You asked him for your cap yesterday in the hall, if you remember. Well, he was simply rude. Oh, Lord, murmured Neville. Don't say, oh, Lord. It isn't polite. Fingers pulled his ear sharply. Ow, said Neville. I mean it. I really do. Of course he's an old servant and all that, but really, well, that's number 1. But, wait, there's number 2 now. Neville, you know I simply love your aunt. I think she's wonderful. She's let me call her Aunt Anna too, by the way. You dear, murmured Neville. Well, and I know all that she's done for you and how she manages the house and all that, but, Neville dear, she really is a little masterful. Masterful? Aunt Anna, help. I want to count 10, please. Well, abrupt. Oh, I do hate to say this, but it's your fault, you know, not hers. You've given everything over to her, and of course she takes charge. But when do you mean? When was she abrupt? I simply don't know what you mean. Well, do you remember when the poor girl, she stopped? No, I won't say that. Consider it unsaid, please. Well, I think so, anyhow. Neville was silent. Neville, my dear, you mustn't be cross. You're counting much more than 10. You mustn't. That's part of the compact. You don't think it was easy for me to... Again, that round, soft voice trembled into silence, and the next instant Neville was beside her. I'm an absolute brute, he said, and you're an angel to have told me. I really will try to be more, well, dignified with Masterson. But as for Aunt Anna, well, she's going when we're married, you know. Let's leave her in peace. There, give me a kiss, please.